We got this. Dude, all right, so before we even get started, so Chevron Burgundy in chat right now, he and I, well, he still works there. I left. But we worked for like one of the biggest internet, no, he left too. One of the biggest internet content delivery companies in the world, right? So they deliver more stuff from one place to another than anyone else. Freya is literally laying in the middle of the floor making this impossible. The way clans were handled. Okay, so all right, we should probably break this down. Okay, here, move. I'll use a black marker just so it's easier, but let's talk about the foundational structure of the internet and the way that things happen between your PC and Hi-Rez, right? So this is bare bones basic stuff, right? So you've got you here, right? And you've got your PC, right? You got your tower, right? And your monitor and all that shit, right? And you're basically, now you say, okay, I'm running SMITE. I've got SMITE here. SMITE, right? I'm connected via a modem through my home internet, right? To my ISP's network, right? ISP, right? Everybody following along? You guys pay Comcast? I gotta wait because there's a huge delay because I'm using another account. Is there a PowerPoint available? No, this is all live. And all right, so let's say this is Comcast, right? Right, and I pay for 100 gigs down. Right? I need confirmation that people are listening, god damn it. So this goes through the internet and it winds up at Hi-Rez's ISP, right? Let's just call this INAP for the sake of argument. INAP's a service provider that lives inside of ISPs and does other shit. So let's call this, that's INAP, right? And we've got our server here, right? Which everybody seems to think is here. Oh, bad drawing. But everybody seems to think that this is constantly on fire, right? These servers are so bad. Fix them, you assholes. Right? So, all right. And if the quality fades at all, just let me know. Okay? Right? So this is the average person's understanding of how their connection to any service provider works, right? So I watch Netflix, I have 1,000 down and I can't watch Netflix. Fucking it's somebody's fault, right? I got bad ping on the servers. I get 1,000 gigs, so it's Hi-Rez's fault. It's INAP's fault, right? Fucking blah, right? Like that's exactly what happens. And the reality of it is that these are the two most simplified pieces and easiest to fix pieces of the entire internet, right? I can figure out what's wrong with my home internet. I can get a technician out quickly within a day or so, right? They can fix anything that's a problem from here to here, right? Hi-Rez has the same luxury. They can work on their own servers. They can add or remove or change things, right? They can call INAP and say, hey, we need a bigger pipe here, right? And this is their zone of control, and this is the average end user's zone of control, right? The problem is 99% of the problems on the internet, 99% of the problems on the internet exist in what people call the cloud, or the network of networks, or the internet, right? Which is all of this shit in the middle, right? You guys ever taken a road trip? ever taken a road trip? Or actually, here you go. Perfect example. Oh, fuck. I don't have.
Welcome back, you beautiful bastard.
Can you bring me up one of the green microfiber cloths down there? I'll love you for. I'll rub your feet later. I need your help. Please? All right. I could use my sweatshirt, but I really don't want to. Use a sock? I like these socks. Okay. Okay, so we'll break this down into a couple of different parts. The first thing is that, hey, Illogical, thank you for the resub. I love you too. Okay, so the first thing is that the internet is governed by protocols. Yeah, I know, the link was fucked up. I just wanted to get started and I double tapped the T. Anyway, the internet is governed by protocols that were developed in the 1970s. They're old as fuck, and it was used to send text messages from military base to military base. That was the foundation of it, right? So when you have, you know, massive movie files and live streaming and all of this shit going over the same, well, not the same pipes, but using the same rules that were originally just meant for text messages, you start to run into problems. The first one is the routing on the internet is absolutely fucked, like totally fucked. And it has nothing to do with Hi-Rez. It has nothing to do with Comcast. It has everything to do with the fact that this shit was built 50 years ago, right? And it just doesn't work for today, okay? And it has to do with something called, I won't get into it, but it's basically BGP, is what is the name of it. But what it is it's the protocol that governs the routing on the internet. I like this sweatshirt. I'll just wash it. Okay. Yeah, you guys are being assholes in the chat. I'm trying to be nice here, okay? So here's the deal, right? I want to access SMITE, right? Box over here, right? Me over here. I'm happy because I like the game, okay? I'm connected to my ISP, which is Comcast, right? They have AT&T, which is over here, right? And then you have this big bauble of other networks, other Charter Communications, Cox Communications, Verizon, fucking, like there's a million of them, Time Warner, right? There's hundreds of them, right? And so the issue is that everybody thinks that because, all right, let's say I'm in LA, right? And this is in New York, right? And somebody goes, well, put the fucking servers in Dallas, right? Because that's closer to me and I'll have lower ping, right? The biggest misconception of the internet is that distance does not mean speed. Distance does not mean speed. Does that make sense to everybody? So even though this is a longer trip, this might be a slower trip. You guys ever got stuck in traffic? Right? You guys have ever had to take a detour or do a bunch of routes to get to where you're going? Right? So just out of the gate, before we talk about Dallas, the fundamental understanding is that the internet is not governed by the fastest path between 2 points. It's governed by what is the most economical route to move traffic. And the reason is because you have something what's called middle mile fuckery, which I coined that term. But basically what happens is so let's just break this down into a couple of different trips, right? And then there's another one there. And let's say this is...
You poor motherfucker.
2, and then let's say this is boop, boop, boop. By the way, Chevron Burgundy gave me this exact same presentation when I joined our company. All right, so let's say these are all networks that you have to pass through, right? So this is AT&T, this is Verizon, right? This is Cox, this is, I don't know, Charter, you know, blah, 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 right? Same shit, they're all basically ISPs, right? So when I want to get content from New York to LA, I first have to make a request, and then I get what's called a response, right? Now, you would think that the internet would say, okay, well, this is the fastest path because I only have to do 1, 2, 3 hops to get to where I'm going. And then it'll be 3 hops on the way back, right? That is the that is the literal logistics equivalent of saying, well, I'm obviously going to get there quicker. I only have to take 2 highways instead of 5. That has nothing to do with the amount of time that it takes or the amount of traffic that's out there, right? So the internet says, well, there's only 2 highways here, so we're going to run it across there, right? So this is 3 hops that we're going to pass all the traffic through there. We don't care how long it takes. This could be 500 milliseconds, right? But it's 3 hops, and that's the way the internet's going to route it because it's the economics of it. Do you guys know why? Who in this model gets paid? Let's say we're only talking about these 4 networks right here. Verizon, AT&T, let's call this, I don't know, ISP B and ISP C, right? So who gets paid in this model? Anybody know? Gold star, if anybody knows. No, Dark Zane is correct. The first and last are the only ones who get paid, right? So you pay AT&T every month for this transaction. Everything you do on the internet, you pay AT&T for. Hi-Rez is over here. They pay Verizon every month to host their data center and give them internet connectivity, right? But all of these networks that exist in between have to carry the traffic for free because of something called net neutrality. Okay? So because all of these networks have to carry it for free, right? The internet is governed and designed to make sure that there's a minimum number of networks that have to carry it for free, right? So BGP says, what's the minimum number of free hops I have to make, which is basically just the way it works, right? And so it has no idea how long it takes you to get somewhere. It doesn't care. If this path with 10 hops is 100 milliseconds, and this one is 150, and this one's 500, guess what? You're going over the 500 millisecond one, right? So let's say I've been having server problems lately, right? I'm almost positive, just for the sake of argument, I think the Hi-Rez servers are hosted in, I think it's Virginia. I am not sure. It's like a really well-connected city. But anyway, long story short, so they're hosted in Virginia, right? So let's say this is me here in Georgia. This is Virginia. And this is my quickest route that it's going to give me right through here. Well, let's say this is the major ISP in Charlotte. Well, Charlotte has Bank of America, right? So Charlotte has Bank of America. It's one of the most highly accessed systems in the country. It generates some of the most traffic. It's got the most end users. Well, I got to go to Charlotte to get to Virginia. So if this is B of A, and because they're having network problems, it's completely fucking choking out this route that I have to take, right? Which means that my ping is going to go up. But for everybody else, so I've got a friend in California. I've got a friend in New York. Right? For everybody else, it's fine, right? Because we're not taking that route through Bank of America. But for me, it's like shit, right? And it feels like ass, right? And then you say, then this is always what comes next, right? Is you go, well, I just played Warzone and I didn't have a problem there. I played Warzone. Okay, well, the Warzone servers are in California. Right? They're in California, Chicago, and Austin, Texas. So you don't have to go through this route to get to Warzone because you're going to a completely fucking different location. It's like traveling on the highway to a city and you get caught in traffic and you say, well, I went to New York and I got caught in traffic, but I just went to Memphis and it was fine. What the fuck is this? This is obviously New York's fault, right? Does that make sense? All right, I'm catching up on chat. Ask me what? Right? Just the destination that you're going has no bearing on the type of connectivity that you're going to experience globally, right? Why can't Hi-Rez fix it? Because Hi-Rez can't call up Bank of America and say, excuse me, Bank of America, I know a lot of people are really worried about not having any money and they're accessing their account and they're withdrawing all their cash and they're stuffing it in mattresses, but could you guys tone it down a little bit so that my game users can come to Virginia? No. But that's the thing. Well, it's the complete inefficiency of the internet, right? Why is SMITE only having problems though? Well, that gets to server infrastructure and they're not. Warzone went down yesterday. Tarkov went down 2 days ago for a lot of different reasons. It's not different for SMITE. Fortnite is Epic Games and they have an infinite amount of money. Infinite, literally infinite. They can shift their hosting locations overnight. Amazon will 100% bow to whatever they need. They're treated with tier 1 priority support by everyone. Fortnite plays in a different realm than everybody else. Does that make sense? No, your information is protected regardless of how many of these it goes over. The packets that you're sending here are super lightweight. It's something called UDP, right? Warzone's not Epic. Epic was having problems. He said Fortnite. Hang on, we're getting to that, Jithins. That is what's called inside the realm of control. What do you mean that ties into net neutrality? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not at all. Net neutrality is why these people can't charge for traffic and why the internet's so fucked. You guys want to know how it works? Here you go. You ready? And the kind of fuckery that you get. And this is why net neutrality was developed. We'll talk about this real quick and then I'll stop. Okay, so let's say this is New York City, right? This is New York. This person represents all the people in New York. You ready? This is Apple over here, okay? And we're gonna, Apple in California. These guys have their ISP. New York has their ISPs. There are a few of them, like 3 or 4, right? And then you have all of these other ISPs that are connected to the ones that are directly in New York, right? Tons of games have had issues since the quarantine. There's lots of reasons for it. All right? And then what? You guys are killing me here. I'm trying to help you all out. I could fuck off and we can go down and play games. Or I could explain to you why the world is not burning to the... Well, no, it literally is on the internet. All right. Anyway, the way this works is when this person says, hey, I want to connect to Apple, they reach out to their ISP and say, I want to reach out to Apple, you know,
Welcome
go get
back,
my content.
you beautiful bastard.
Right? The ISP basically reaches out to every one of these and says, hey, how many of those hop things are you away from Apple, right? And then this guy comes back and says, well, I'm 6. This guy says, well, I'm 8, right? This guy says, well, I'm 10. And this guy says, I'm 14, okay? So based on this, which one of these ISPs is going to have to carry that traffic? It's not a node, no, this is a full-blown ISP, Swift, right? This is AT&T or Comcast, we'll use that since Swift is in the chat. Comcast goes to AT&T, to Verizon, to Cox, to Charter and says, how far away from here are you, right? And the guy who reports back that they have the lowest number is the one that's going to carry the traffic for free. No, it does not depend on speed. Absolutely, completely, unequivocally false. The internet routing is not based on speed at all. It is one, go look up the protocol. It's called BGP. We went over this earlier. It is the minimum number of hops because that is the most economically efficient way to deliver traffic. because it's the minimum numbers of ISPs and routers and everything else that have to carry the traffic for free. Okay? So let's say this guy is, let's say this is VZB, Verizon Business, right? They're the shortest number of hops to Apple, okay? That means that for every download, every single download that comes from Apple that goes to New York, this guy has to carry every bit of traffic for free to one of the largest metropolises in the country. Right? Does that make sense? So this guy gets ultra fucked. He can't charge anything for it because of net neutrality. So what used to happen is when this guy would come and say, hey, Comcast, go retrieve me a route, right? And this guy's getting fucked in the ass because he has to carry all the traffic. When they say, hey, Verizon, how far away are you? This guy's like, oh man, I'm like 20, right? And then it passes on to the next ISP. And then this guy gets hosed, right? And so he says, I'm 18. I'm 110. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and fucks up the routing of the entire internet because nobody wants to carry this shit for free. That's why net neutrality, one of the reasons net neutrality was originally enacted is because they were fucking up the routing of the internet because nobody wanted to be the guys in the middle who got fucked. They used to lie like that a lot. They, even after net neutrality, because of the financial impact of it, they would do that. Because all of these ISPs inside of New York, right? These guys are all getting paid by the people who live there. Everybody else has to carry that shit for free, right? I'm some rinky-dink ISP in the Midwest, but for some reason my route is Apple's direct, line into Boston. So now I get pounded, even though I've only got a couple 100,000 customers. I got to carry all this fucking traffic, right? So anyway, long story short, that's why the internet's fucked in terms of routing, okay? Which is why we have all of these problems today where you say, oh, like Kurt used to complain about this all the time. I live in Virginia. I live near the servers. And there's this big misconception that just because you're close to where they're hosted, it means that it's gonna be a fast experience. Let me give you a perfect example. I told my chat this last night. You guys ever been to McDonald's? Anybody ever been to McDonald's? I got a McDonald's right out here off the street, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I'm here and I'm a very happy consumer. I want to go to McDonald's. I have a McDonald's right out there, right off the highway, right? Maybe 4 minutes away from the house, right? So I say, I want to go get me some Golden Arches, the new double-sized Big Mac. This is 4 minutes from the house, okay? And then you say, okay, they don't have one in Puerto Rico. That's actually funny as shit. And then you say, okay, well, this road that I usually take, it's very short because I live really close to it, but it's still taking me 100 minutes to get there, right? It's taking me 100, but it's right there. This is what you sound like when you bitch about your ping. But it's right there. I live right there. All right, dickhead, there's an accident on the highway. And the same type of accidents that happen on the highway happen on the internet. Congestion, people knocking over routers, bad hardware, right? All of this shit. Your traffic light is out right out here at the intersection. This route doesn't work anymore, right? So even though let's say this is a 0.5 mile trip, it usually takes 4 minutes, but now it takes 100, right? Well, now we have a McDonald's over here. But for some reason, this is on a really nice stretch of highway. This is a 20-mile trip. But this can also take, but this one will take 5 minutes, right? And it's in Chicago instead of in Virginia. Right? So just because the shit is close doesn't mean it's going to be fast, and it doesn't mean the next best alternative has to be something that's nearby to you, right? All right, listen, Taylor, we're talking about the speed of light here. Back off. All right, but anyway, I think you guys get what I'm saying is is distance doesn't matter on the internet. We're talking about the speed of light, okay? So if it was just about distance, then you could host your servers in Miami and live in Seattle, and it would cross the country in, I think it's like 15 milliseconds, okay? So if it was just about distance and there was nothing else involved, the most ping that any of us would get is 15 milliseconds, which is not possible, right? The only way that you get sub 30 millisecond ping on a gaming server is if you use the same ISP that it's hosted in, right? So I live in Atlanta, ATL, they host the server at Comcast. So I have Comcast, and the server is also connected to Comcast. This is the only way you get sub 30 millisecond pings. And even then, not even fucking close, right? So you have to say there's all of this shit in the middle that makes this an impossible problem to solve. Now, the company I used to work for did a little bit of that, but it doesn't apply to gaming because of the protocols that gaming uses. But this is Jarman, I don't know if you're still here, but this is exactly why when people bitch about ping, that ping is an indicator that something is going on the internet that is causing problems. And it's with a network provider, it's not a server, generally. You can have server issues because there's part of the transition that happens in the data center, but it's usually very minimal. If every ISP got paid for the hops, ideal paths would be taken, the speed would improve. The only way speed would be improved is if you fundamentally changed the protocols that govern the foundation of the internet, right? It's kind of like one of those things where if every house on the street was built with a concrete foundation, then it's really hard to go back and change and tell everybody to switch to brick, right? Because then you'd have some people who are in code, some people who are out of code. It's kind of a bad example. I'm trying to think of a better one. But basically, everybody has to communicate using the same governing principles or it doesn't work. You have to use the same protocols, right? So TCP and UDP, right? And the internet connections would cost an absolute fuckload more. There are ways around it. There are companies that do it. The company we used to work for has technology that basically they put so you have servers in every one of these ISPs. And so instead of making one connection from here to here, you make a whole bunch of little mini connections and then test the path. So this is 100 milliseconds, this is 150, and this is 500, right? So there's a box here, a box here, a box here, a box here, and we could pick the best route. But it doesn't apply to game traffic because of the way game traffic works. Does this make sense to people? Is 100 ping and SMITE bad? I mean, I think it's bad. Dude, why am I getting blown up on Twitter? Hang on. All right, so now let's go back to your connections with the actual game servers themselves. All right, so what causes your ping? Actually, it's not really your ping, but what causes what contributes to your player experience is something called a round trip time, right? So your ping, I think your ping, I'm not sure if gaming ping is your total round trip time or if it's just what you get back from the server. I don't know. I guess it depends on how you measure it. But so the way that this works is you have a person, right? My computer has to now report to the server where I am. Everything about, wait, do you think there's any chance protocols change to allow small server routing? No, not at all. Everything's too ingrained. Is it server-based, not instance-based? Oh, you just learned that phrase last night. Don't even give me that shit. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Yeah, well, sometimes they just measure like what the trip time back from the game server is. So I have to, every millisecond, or however often the client demands, I have to now report all the information I can back to the server, right? So I have to tell them what direction I'm facing, what abilities I use, what buttons I pressed, where I am on the map, where I'm heading, what my trajectory is, am I slowed, am I this, am I that, and then the server takes all that information from 9 people, 10 people, has to make sense of it and then send packets back the other direction, right? It uses a protocol called UDP. UDP, we used to joke, we call it the unreliable data protocol, because all you do is you say, I'm 4, I'm 4, I'm 4, I'm 4, I'm 4, I'm 5, I'm 5, I'm 5, I'm 5, I'm 5, I'm 5. You don't get a response back from the server that says, hey, got it, no worries, thank you for the 4s. They don't answer you. They just give you the next piece of information that you need, right? So there's nothing here that establishes a connection. You're actually literally just told where to send all your shit at the beginning of a match, and then you just bombard this fucking server with information throughout the entire duration of the game. The protocol is called UDP, and they bombard you back with all the information that they're figuring out on the back end. So what this leads to is something called your round trip time. So my CPU, I press a button, my CPU's got to convert that into some instructions. That goes across the internet, and then it gets to the server, right? This part is the lion's share of the trip, is going across the internet. The server picks it up, reads it, goes, okay, I got all this other information. We're going to compile it, package it together, and we're going to go back the other way. This total trip is your ping. It sits in this warehouse for a very, very short amount of time. It doesn't really even sit there. They just send other shit back based on the information you provide them. It's constantly gathering data and then spitting shit out to you and your 9 other players, right? But this is what determines your ping, is going from the client to the server and back, right? So at any point along this way, whether it's your ISP, their ISP, or all this bullshit in the middle, you could have a disruption. Actually, what's even crazier is you could have a disruption on this route, but not on this route, and you're fine. You could have a disruption on both, and it feels like shit. You could have another friend who's playing on a different ISP in your same geography. I could have somebody on AT&T across the street from me that's getting a better connection than I am, simply because AT&T is connected to the data center that the server's sitting in, and the problem is on this route and not any of these, right? So this guy's 500 feet from me, and he's having a great time. Does this all make sense? Are people actually enjoying this, or am I just kind of ranting? Okay, cool. The delay is kind of funny. Freya, shut the fuck up. All right, so that's a problem. So if it's related to ping, now there's server crashes, which are different, right? But if it's related to ping, right, there's so much fucked up shit that goes on with the routing of the internet that you have no idea if it's Hi-Rez or your ISP or one in the middle. There's no way for you to tell, right? Because you can't compare it to anything else unless you access a service that's in the same location as the Hi-Rez servers at the same time. I spent 8 years in I'm in cybersecurity now. I was my own engineer for 2, long story there, but I effectively was my own engineer for 2. And I got a psychology degree, but basically, this is something that'll fuck all of you up. You ready? So you could be sitting directly next to the servers, but because they're in a different ISP, you have a longer trip than everybody else. You ready? This is the one that will fuck you up for life. Okay? So you've got Boston. I know this is true because I know people in Boston that work there, okay? So you've got Verizon and Comcast. This is gonna look like a dick, but I swear to God it's not important, or it's not intentional. You got Comcast, you got Verizon, right? My game server is in Verizon. My client is in Comcast, okay? You would think they're the same network in the same location. They're really close together. We're just gonna build a little bridge between these two. And then there's only one hop to get this person from here to here, right? This is gonna blow your minds. You would think that makes the most sense, right? I'm pausing here. This would make the most sense, except Verizon and Comcast fucking hate each other. Hate each other. There is nowhere in the country that Verizon connects with Comcast because they don't want to see the other one succeed. They fucking hate each other. So you're in Boston, your game servers are in Boston, but you're on Comcast, they're on Verizon, and guess what? The nearest place that you could find somebody who has an agreement with both of them, all right, then it's AT&T. One of them's, it's either AT&T or somebody hates Comcast, Swift. I don't remember who it is. We'll call it AT&T. Oh no, it's AT&T and Verizon. So AT&T and Verizon hate each other, right? Whatever, moot point, okay? They fucking hate each other, so they won't do something called peering with each other, which means I'm not gonna share my traffic with you, you're not gonna share my traffic with me. The nearest place that you can connect with AT&T and Verizon is you have to go down to one of the biggest cross connects in the country, New York City, to somebody like Cox, who has an agreement with both. So even though I live in Boston, my servers are in Boston, I have to go all the way to New York, jump on another fucking ISP, connect all the way back to get my data center shit. But shit like this happens all the time, right? You'll have situations where, like, maybe not AT&T and Verizon, but AT&T will say, okay, I will give you traffic in Boston, but elsewhere where our networks touch, over here, so this is our network, this is our network, so Verizon, right? Over here in Dallas, you're gonna give me traffic, but I'm not gonna give it back to you. So the game server will respond to you quickly in Boston, but you won't request quickly because these guys fucking hate each other. We are explaining why SMITE's having problems. So when it comes to ping, right, there's a lot of shit you could bitch about, but when it comes to ping specifically, there is no way that you or anyone else know that this is a problem with Hi-Rez, first of all, right? Because it could be you, it could be your ISP, it could be the ISPs that are connected to your ISPs that are in between you. Like, let's say you live in the EU, right? So we live in the EU. I'm gonna go over here, we're gonna do one more. So I live in the EU, I'm in Germany, right? This little blob up here. The ISP, the SMITE servers are hosted in Switzerland, right? And then you've got these big things called transoceanic pipes or cables. I don't even remember them. Are over here, and then you got a server over in New York, right? So you would think that this little route here into Zurich would be the best way for you to get your information from here. Well, the answer is no. Because at the beginning of the game, when the game is deciding where you're gonna sit, okay, which server are we gonna pick? We got a guy in California, we got a guy in New York, we got a guy in Atlanta. Okay, which one of these servers are we gonna send them to? We're gonna ping all of them that we have. We're gonna figure out the one that has the best connection for pretty much everybody, and that's where we're gonna send them, right? Well, the problem is that sometimes this isn't the best place to go, even though it's local and close, right? So Deadluck asked earlier, well, I had 140 ping and everybody else said that they had 50, right? Well, it could be a lot of things. One, this could be a 140 ping route to Zurich, and then everybody else in France and Spain and Russia, because I guess they get a lot of Russians, they all have a 50 millisecond route into the data center, right? Or you even have people that'll say, okay, this is a 500 millisecond problem, but I get 140 if I go to the US, right? How are they allowed to do what? Measure the ping? I mean, I could send you anywhere, right? If I give this person this IP address, 1.1.1.1, and I say, you are connecting to this game server, it will choose the most economic route for this person to get to here. But before, when the client says, hey, start a game, it can say, hey, how far are you from here? How far are you from here? How far are you from here? Right? It will still go along the most economic path between the user and the data center, but you can measure it if you have a piece of hardware at the beginning and end of the round trip. How are they allowed to deny access to traffic if they hate each other? They don't. They do what's called. They don't sign what's called a peering agreement, right? So usually, if you pass traffic back and forth between each other, you have an agreement that says, "Hey, we'll give you your traffic, you give our traffic." Right? Or up to a certain amount, or you have to maintain this quality of service for us and we'll maintain the same quality of service for you, right? They're called peering agreements. You can look them up, you can Google them. But you could straight up, but you could say like, hey, you know what? I don't like you at all. I don't want to peer with you, right? No, nobody would make Coke and Pepsi say, hey, you guys both have to be in the store together. If I don't want to be in the store with Pepsi, I could say, fuck you guys, right? I'm not going in. Is this all making sense for the most part? Because we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is capacity. Okay. How many people here live in a house? How many people here live in a house? Okay, so you live in a house. You guys ever had people over? You guys ever had people over to your house? You ever thrown a party? So you guys have thrown a party before, okay? What's the most amount of people you ever had over for your party? Shut the fuck up, Charlie. 30 people? 7? All right, I'll ask Bernie. Bernie, yeah, let's ask
back,
Psycha.
you
50 is a good
bastard.
number. Psycha, did you... Yeah, Swift, thank you for the resub, man. Psycha, did you buy a bigger living room or build a bigger driveway after you knew those 50 people were coming? Did you build a driveway for 50 people? And then you added an addition to your house for the party? No, why not? Why would you ever do that? Because there's only 4 to 5 people that are coming and going at any time, right? costs a shitload of money. You could do it. If you had unlimited funds, you could do it. But there's no fucking way anybody's gonna build a driveway or build a living room or build a fucking warehouse in their backyard if they throw one party every 5 years to accommodate that amount of people. No, you deal with what you have. The road outside of you is gonna get a little congested, right? And some people are gonna have trouble moving in and out and moving their cars and shit like that, but you deal with it because it's temporary, right? This is legitimately, this is how capacity planning works on the internet, okay? You take what you have. Let's call these the SMITE servers, okay? Let's say we're throwing a party, all right? We're throwing a party, all right, and we're only gonna have, we're gonna feed everybody. Every day, we're gonna throw a party, we're gonna feed everybody who shows up, right? And we got enough serving stations for 10 people. We got a driveway that's big enough for 10 people, all right? And then, we've got the neighborhood road. Because it's the neighborhood road, this could probably fit like 100 on it, right? Because it's a neighborhood road, right? Okay? So we throw this party, okay? And then somebody hears about it, right? It says, hey, there's this party going on, there's free food. Okay? So now all of a sudden, we got enough resources to generally serve about 10 people at a time. If there's a backlog, we can get some people in, we can get them out. It might take a little longer, it might get a little uncomfortable for a while, but generally, we have enough to serve 10. Let's say the actual is actually 5, right? And then 50, right? So we have about twice as much of what we need, right? Because, somebody might hear about it. We get in the local newspaper or something like that, and somebody says, hey, you know what? We're all going to go to this party. We're going to show up to the party. Maybe some big streamer highlights this party, and all of the people that are friends with him say, I want to go to the party too. So now we get up to like 8, right? You go, oh shit, right? And then, you got like 75 waiting out in the neighborhood. Then you start approaching this max, but you still haven't hit it, right? Because you planned out for twice as much as what you need. Okay, what is going on the internet right now is if this is fucking 80, and 750. And it's like this for every single service. And not only that, you have other people in your neighborhood, right? Like Netflix, who have big driveways and big servers that can handle 100 people at once, but they're bringing in another 1,000 people into the neighborhood that can only handle 100. Okay? So does that make sense? So Jithin's asked earlier, I'm sure he's left by now because he doesn't like the sound of my voice. But Jithin's asked earlier, well, why do you need to remove the API? Why do you have to remove clans, right? Think about it this way. Those services are like the dessert and hors d'oeuvres of the dinner that we're serving, right? So at some point you say, we have way too many fucking people, but if we don't serve dessert and we don't serve hors d'oeuvres, everybody can still eat, but now we can serve 70 instead of 10. Does that make sense? So we remove clans, we remove the API, and now for the part that people really come here to care about, which is playing the game, we can still serve them the entree, right? And then you say, well, fuck you, Hi-Rez, you should have planned for 70. This is a once in 100-year pandemic. This is something that hasn't happened since like 1918. There have been other pandemics, but not this bad, right? People are freaked the fuck out. What's an API? It's an application performance interface. It's basically a way of querying an application and getting shit back from it, right? So there is no way unless you sat there and you said in your meeting, well, guys, we get 5, okay? We have capacity for 10, but do you think we should build a really big driveway and a really big living room just in case we ever hit 70, which is like 30x our current traffic? It's like 30 times what we're doing now. There's always booze at the party. Oh yeah, Starkey, that one drives me fucking insane. Don't even get me started. But that's what I'm talking about, right? I asked Psycho earlier. I said, okay, you have 50 people over. Did you build a bigger driveway? Did you build a bigger living room? And he answered, no, that's fucking insane. Because even if you had a party for 50 people, you would build it once and then you would only use a fraction of it for the rest of the year. Right? It's the same concept with servers. And then you say, well, fucking build it now. Like, it's obvious we need it. Well, first of all, nobody knows how long this shit's gonna last. So they could, in between contracts and architecture setup and getting payment processed and all that shit, you're looking at like a month of time anyway, between when you decide to do it and when it's actually deployed, if you're doing it in an emergency. And then on top of that, imagine you had to pay a mortgage on this addition to your house, right? So for the next 3 years, you gotta pay for your bigger driveway and you gotta pay for your bigger house, even though you only used it 1 day 3 years ago. I just fucking drew on my chair. Because Netflix uses something called a content delivery network, Starkey. Have those people pay for it, Bernie? Oh, well, what you just suggested is SMITE saying, hey, everybody, we're experiencing increased traffic, so if you want to play this weekend, you got to buy 500 gems. How do you think that one's going to go over? Think about that. No, what you do is you try and take what you have and make it work more efficiently in the short term so people can come in and still eat. And then you make a long-term decision of what level of capacity is appropriate, right? Because if I want to expand my driveway, I got to call Amazon to expand my driveway. They say, great, we're doing a lot of driveway expansions right now. Netflix just did a driveway expansion because everybody's at home watching this shit. So they just did a driveway expansion too. We're doing a whole bunch of these. So sign up for this driveway expansion for the next 3 years. And by the way, it's going to cost you a couple $1 million for the extra capacity, right? And oh, by the way, if it goes back to normal tomorrow, everybody goes back to work, we come out with a vaccine, everybody goes back to work, and it's gone tomorrow, you still have to pay for this shit for the next 3 years. So instead of making a ridiculous decision like that, which would pretty much probably cause you to lay a whole bunch of people off and do a bunch of uncomfortable shit, you do whatever you can to make sure what you're doing is as efficient as possible. So you remove all non-essential services. Does that make sense? No, Vardy, because you pay to play the game, or well, maybe not, but if you paid to play the game already and then you have to up to be able to play this weekend, people would be fucking furious. All right, now we're gonna do one more. And this is the real hidden problem that people don't talk about. This is what happened to Tarkov. I hope this makes sense to you guys. But so let's say sorry, I'm catching up on the chat. Is it buying a bigger living room or renting? It's renting. You can buy, but you would rent a bigger living room. But you have to rent it for 3 years, Charlie. It depends. You can do both. You could buy and then you own the shit in somebody else's data center, or you can literally rent somebody else's shit from someone else. Either way, it's expensive as fuck and you have to own it for 3 years. Okay, yeah, no, I can throw this on YouTube, no problem. All right, so now here's the real problem. And this is where you get into the crazy shit, okay? Let's just say I'm a complete asshole, okay? And we got Tarkov over here. Tarkov. We got Netflix. And then we've got SMITE over here. So strictly from an IT security perspective, okay, you should never, and I mean never, advertise the reason why your services are struggling, because it creates what's called a targeted point of vulnerability. I don't know if that's an industry term, that's just what we called it, right? If SMITE's having problems and I'm an outsider that doesn't know anything about it, right? I can guess what's going on. Well, maybe their driveway is having problems, their ISP is having problems. Maybe their neighborhood's having problems. Maybe Tarkov's got a lot of traffic and it's impacting people getting to SMITE. But if you say, my living room isn't big enough, now you've just told the entire world, right? Now you've just told the entire world that you don't have enough room in your living room and it's causing problems, right? So you get what's called financial opportunist hackers, okay? And this is cool shit because I could say, hey SMITE, I understand that you can only handle 70 people in your living room. Well, unless you pay me a Bitcoin, I'm gonna send 70,000 people into your living room, and I'm not gonna stop until you pay me. Does that make sense? So I already know these guys are having problems. If they say nothing, I can speculate. I could say, well, maybe it's their servers. It could be their ISP. It could be a lot of things, right? But because I know it's their infrastructure that's having problems because their living room isn't big enough, I'm gonna send the fucking squad. And people do this all the time. It's called DDoS extortion. They do this, you know when they do this? Is they do it during Cyber Monday, when all these companies make all this money online. So if the week before Black Friday, you're a shoe manufacturer, I call you and I say, hey, I hear this is a really important week for you. It'd be a shame if your website went down. So I'm gonna take it down right now on Tuesday. Not a big deal. But if you don't pay me, I'm gonna take it down on Thursday and I'm gonna take it down on Monday. And you make 60% of your money on those 2 days. So it's worth it just to give me $17,000 of Bitcoin and then I'll just go away. They do this shit all the time to retailers. And they do it to game companies too, because these are the times when game companies are having the most success. SMITE even came out and said it. We have more new players in SMITE right now than we've had in an unbelievable amount of time because everybody's sitting at home trying to find something to do, right? So it would be a damn shame if all those people had a really terrible experience. I'm not saying that's what happened to SMITE, but Tarkov has had issues with DDoS attacks, and it was right after they said they were struggling due to capacity because they hadn't planned on having this many people. Warzone had issues. Netflix is a different story, and it's because of the two different content types on the internet, but the whole point is that, one, you can never prepare for something like this at all, right? You can never sit there and say, hey, the maximum amount of people we've ever seen in a living room is 8. We're gonna provision for 10, and when there's 70, you can't blame somebody for not having 70 people worth of capacity in their living room. There's no way. So what they're doing is they're sitting there trying to make this living room as efficient as possible by removing other services so that they can feed as many people as they possibly can. You get something called session overlap, right? Which is the number of people that are in game at a given time. That's why the queue times came down, right? So that you have all of these different instances starting at different times, okay? The way the queue system works now is, and there's offset queues too, but the way the queue system works now is that everybody's on the same timer, and when the timer reaches 0, there's a massive calculation that happens for everybody, and then they go into their game. It was 3 minutes long, now it's a minute and a half. So every minute and a half, we're putting people onto the servers, versus every 3 minutes when we have a bigger pool of people waiting, right? So they're doing things like that to stop the overwhelming load. Anyway, do you guys want to know why Netflix isn't having problems? Is that interesting to you or not? Yes? Okay. Okay. Anybody here drink soda? Anybody here ever had a Coca-Cola? You guys have had a Coca-Cola, right? Who has anybody had a Coca-Cola recently? Anybody had a Coca-Cola recently? All right, where did you get your Coca-Cola? Bernie, where'd you get your Coke, buddy? Fuck. Casey's, is that a convenience store? Wait, this doesn't make any sense. Guys, cut the bullshit, okay? Coca-Cola is based in Atlanta, Georgia, so you could have only come to Atlanta, Georgia to get it, right? They're headquartered down here. You had to have come to Atlanta, Georgia, right? No. What? Well, why not? Oh, they distribute all over. Bingo. That's the first type of content on the internet. Do you know why they can distribute all over? Because a Coke is the exact same thing for everybody who experiences it, right? A Coke it's the same flavor, it's the same taste, it's the same can, it's the same bottle, no matter who's consuming it. So we could put it all over the place so people can consume it, right? So let's take this and we'll translate this into a Netflix movie. We'll call it The Princess Bride. Okay, we've got the Netflix servers here, Netflix, right? And we've got somebody in New York, we got somebody in Virginia, we got somebody in Georgia, we got a guy in Miami. So we're doing Miami, ATL, and Virginia, and New York. Okay. So if these guys want a Coke, right, they're going to go to their local gas station in Virginia, New York, Atlanta, and Miami, right? So this is the way that something called static content on the internet is distributed by companies who have a lot of fucking money. They use something called a content delivery network. If you Google it, there's dozens of them. And some of them build their own, like Apple builds their own. But the original way, before the content delivery network, everybody would come all the way back to Netflix. They would get The Princess Bride and they would go all the way back, right? Well, why, right? Does The Princess Bride change when you watch it in Pennsylvania? No. Does it change when you watch it in New York? No. Does it change when you watch it in the Bronx versus Queens? No, it is the exact same piece of fucking content no matter where you watch it, right? And so what Netflix did is said, okay, instead of having this big ass data center in California that everybody's got to come to, why don't we put a bunch of little data centers all over the world in all the major cities, right? So that when somebody in New York, you got somebody in Queens, you got somebody in the Bronx, you got somebody in Manhattan, when they want to watch The Princess Bride, they get it from right here locally in New York, right? Or they get it from here in Virginia, right? In this data center, right? Same thing with Atlanta. But you guys, so there you have the Cokes of the internet, and then you have they have a program where you can get your own name written on it, right? You can get like a customized bottle, right? Well, if it's the same experience for everybody else, then you can get content hyper locally, which means it is not impacted by the bullshit that happens here in the middle of the internet, right? It's almost always gonna be from inside of your same ISP. So I'm here, I have Comcast in Atlanta. When I wanna watch a movie, it comes from Comcast in Atlanta. Does that make sense? So I don't have to deal with what happens in Charlotte. I don't have to deal with what happens in Virginia. I get it here locally, which minimizes the amount of shit that can go wrong. Who wants to guess why this doesn't work for video games? No. Ah, see, Puny Wet Banana fell into the trap. Puny Wet Banana fell into the trap. Why doesn't this work for video games? Nope, not too much. Aw, Keen Andres, thank you for the gifted subs. 1, 2, 3. Bingo, exactly. British Spectre got it. 100%. Every piece of content in a video game is a different experience for every single end user.
You poor motherfucker.
No, it has nothing to do with it being expensive. It doesn't matter, right? My character is in a different location, doing a different thing, pressing a different button than yours is at the exact same time. There is nothing shared about our experience at all. So we can't go to different places. We all have to go to the same place, okay? We have to go to the California. We have to go to the SMITE servers in Virginia, because I can't go to one in Atlanta while you go to one in New York, because then we're not on the same server, right? Does that make sense? So this whole notion of buy better servers or move them around or do shit like that doesn't make a fucking bit of sense at all, because somebody always gets fucked when you move things around. Servers, honestly, between you and me, guys, servers are not that expensive. You can rent them out from cloud companies, but the problems are where you host them, what's connected to where you host them, what do the internet traffic conditions look like on the things that you're hosting, or on the tertiary services around you. Am I in the same data center as Netflix that has one of these little things, right? Is that causing internet issues for my servers? It's all stuff that's outside of your control, right? So what happens is, is you get servers in Virginia, right? So they're not here anymore, right? These are our players. These are the people who play SMITE, right? And they say, okay, well now we gotta go to Virginia. Well, it's okay for people coming from Miami. People in Atlanta, they have an outage, right? A route outage. So that's fucking, this has 150 millisecond ping. Miami's 50, Virginia's 30, New York is 100 for whatever reason, right? And inevitably, you have some group of people that are dissatisfied with it. There's always somebody who has a poorer connection than somebody else, right? For all the reasons I explained to you guys before. So moving this to Atlanta doesn't really fucking change anything, because it means the Virginia people are now having the Atlanta experience. Miami might get a little bit better, New York might get a little worse, and then people do the dumbest fucking thing ever, which says, well, we got players in California and we got players on the East Coast, so let's just stick it in Texas or in Chicago, and now everybody has a mediocre experience, except the people who live here, and including the people in California. So this is, 100, right? So server deployments are a combination of where are my users, right? If I had, so people say all the time, well, we got West Coast users and we got East Coast users. Why don't we have something in the middle? Well, what if this is 10% of the population and this is 90? Do we really want to Do we really want to move the servers to Chicago? Because we're going to degrade the experience for 90% of users and we're going to improve it for 10. I don't know what the distribution is for Hi-Rez, right? Because sometimes you say, okay, well, you know what? We'll put a server over here for the California people, which is what they do. They have West Coast servers and East Coast servers. And then we'll put a server over here in Virginia for everybody on the East Coast. So the 90% get a local experience, and the 10% over here get a local experience. But that means they're also playing with a smaller population. Matchmaking is worse. Would you take 100 ping to Virginia and be able to play with everybody, or 50 ping locally and get a bunch of shitters on your team? Right? So we don't want to move to Chicago. We don't want to move to Texas if we have a whole lion's share of the population over here in the East Coast. So the things that you have to look at when you're doing server deployments is, where are my end users, right? If they're all in New York, put the fucking server in New York. If 90% of them are in New York or the Northeast, put it in New York, right? It's pretty evenly mixed across the East Coast. Okay, put them in Virginia. Great. And then it inevitably says, well, we got a whole bunch in South Florida. Well, let's put them in Atlanta. Wait. Atlanta doesn't have good internet connectivity, so the number of routes, damn it, fucking dumb shit. So the number of routes that our users, remember we talked about routes earlier, right? And how that's can you guys hear me? Okay, so we talked about routes earlier, and how connected an ISP is means there's more options for people to get into your network. That means that on average, people are gonna have a much better experience, and there's less shit that can go wrong, right? So if we're talking about, we're gonna host in Virginia, right? And there's a place in Virginia in Ashburn where you can host, and it's connected to hundreds of different ISPs because they all come together in Ashburn, Virginia. That means there's like 50 different fucking routes you could take to get to this data center. But then you look at Atlanta, right? And because there's only 3 or 4 ISPs down here, there are only 3 or 4 ways to get into the data center. So if any one of these has a problem or goes down or is relying on each other, it's more things that can go wrong and less options that the traffic has to get to you, right? Exactly, British Spectre. So it's where do we put our resources, okay? It's how connected are those resources gonna be when we put them there? It's where are our end users, right? Because again, if I have 90% of my population in the UK, just because I put it in Virginia doesn't mean we're gonna have a good experience for anybody, right? So it's where is everybody? How connected are they? There is a cost component to it, right? Because Ashburn's a super well-connected place. It's like living in a nice neighborhood. Your real estate's gonna be much more expensive. So you have to look at it and say, okay, can we move, instead of doing Ashburn, Virginia, can we do Maryland or Baltimore, right? Which is fairly close, fairly as well connected, a little less expensive, right? But you could say things like that, and that's how you determine server distribution, right? And in a lot of cases, it has to do with what is the average ping that people are getting, and you can do all kinds of, what they're called synthetic tests, where you basically simulate an end user connecting to those places. And after all of that, you look at all the distribution, you say, okay, this is where we're putting our servers. Well, guess what? Again, just because you have the servers in Virginia doesn't mean there's not traffic on the road from Virginia to Atlanta. And that's what causes high ping, right? So the things that will, Hi-Rez gets a lot of shit where people are like, yo, your servers are fucked, okay? Well, they are. We have 70 people coming for dinner, right? And they're trying whatever they can to make sure as many people get fed as possible. And every single service on the internet is having problems with it. Discord has had problems. Twitter's had problems. Netflix has had problems due to the authentication. So when you log in, that step when you log in is a dynamic transaction. That's dynamic content. It has to go back to the Netflix servers. It can't stay here in New York, right? That was what was taking down Netflix. Tarkov, Warzone. I think Fortnite had a flub, but they got over it. But all these different services on the internet have had problems because the situation is so insane because there's so much more traffic coming to all these services. Remember the neighborhood example I gave earlier? SMITE could have the biggest living room in the world, but if their ISP is getting choked out, there's nothing that they could do, right? If they're in the same ISP as Tarkov and Netflix, and all of a sudden their neighborhood's full, their living room's not, their driveway isn't, but their neighborhood is full, then guess what? People that want to come eat at their house aren't getting in either, right? So anyway, this is not like some like grand defense of SMITE, right? All I'm saying is that the problems that they're experiencing are very normal. It's not something you can plan for. It's not something you can fix quickly. And it's perfectly reasonable that they're doing what they're doing. And no amount of money would fix this. No amount of money would fix this because you can't deploy architecture that quickly without risking taking down everything else. Does that make sense? All right. Was this helpful for everybody? Do you guys want me to shut the fuck up? I can. We can go back to playing SMITE. Any other questions? Any other questions? Is there anything else connection-wise or connectivity-wise that you guys are frustrated about? Computer engineer? I was my own engineer for 2 years.
Holy shit, is that a new sub?
Like, is there something that happens where you say, hey, this is super frustrating?
You poor motherfucker.
Thanks. Like that, hey, I have this problem in SMITE and it's Hi-Rez's fault and I don't like it. Hey, Kerr, thank you for the sub, man. Right?
You
so we've explained things like
motherfucker.
ping, right? Why ping isn't your fault or SMITE's fault. But you always have the, everybody's need. Why does 60 ping sometimes feel worse than 120 ping? That usually is server-based. Because your connection is fine, but the information that you're getting back is not, or the information that you're giving is corrupted, right? So it's getting there in time, or it's missing pieces of it. Like imagine I sent you a letter every second, and it was a different piece of the same message, like A, B, C, D, E, F, right? Well, they're getting to you and they're coming back quickly, but what if you only got every 4 of them, right? You ever seen people skip around the map, right? It's because their computer is transmitting, hey, this is where I am on the map, this is where I am on the map, this is where I am on the map. And the server's saying, okay, he's at 1, he's at 2, he's at 3, he's at 7, he's at 12. Hey, everybody, he's at 12, but they missed the instruction of where they were along the way. Tabiki just gave me mac and cheese, and I'm very happy, but I'm super upset that she gave me a fork. Sometimes that's just straight up rendering, like issues with your machine, right? But again, the ping could have nothing to do with you. Here's what happens. So traffic, no, it's consistency. You need 2 things to do well at a video game. There's 3 components of delivery. There's bandwidth, which is how much information can you send at once. There's ping, which is how fast can it get there. And then there's packet loss, which is how much of this information is actually arriving at its destination, right? So if I lose 3 out of 4 packets, I have a 75% packet loss. It means the server is not getting 75% of the information I'm sending it, which makes it really hard for it to keep up. I'm in Maryland, give a connection 20 minutes from DC, the internet traffic be the reason I struggle connecting to SMITE servers and other things like that. It's probably just your ISP. Lag is a free blink if you're laggy enough. Everybody's seen that. Everybody's seen somebody do that in their games. Everybody's had that happen to them, right? But anyway, what's another one that I've heard? Yeah, if it's ping related, it probably has nothing to do with SMITE. You know what, the only thing you could blame them for is that they're in the wrong data center, it doesn't have the right connectivity, which there's no way you can prove that anyway, because it really could be your ISP not being connected to the right networks, right? So you gotta get benefit of the doubt there, right? And when they move the servers, the routes get better for some people and worse than others. You guys remember 2 years ago when they moved the servers and it got better for everybody in the Northeast, but Kurt was bitching about the fact that he didn't have 35 ping, now he had 70? Yeah, guess what? There's a whole swath of people that now had 30 ping, and now he doesn't, right? So when they move, it gets worse for some and better for others. It's just a fact of life. Depends on how vocal those people are. So we covered ping, we covered resource and capacity planning, we covered packet loss, we covered bandwidth, we covered the difference between dynamic and static content. We covered DDoS attacks. Like, what else is confusing you guys about how these games are connected? Should we just get back to SMITE? What do you guys think? Oh, that goes back to an earlier point, by the way, which is your packet loss, or excuse me, your bandwidth is completely fucking irrelevant. If you get 1,000 gigs down, that is like saying, dude, I have a giant ass driveway. Why the fuck is it taking my friend so long to get here from New York? Right? I paid for 1,000-foot wide driveway. Why the fuck can't I get to New York quickly? Could you imagine going out in the street? If I go out there right now and I bitch at my neighbor and I say, I have 1,000-foot wide driveway. Why the hell is it taking me so long to get to New York City? That's what you sound like. That's what people sound like when they say, well, I got the good package from Comcast. I shouldn't have bad ping at all. You sound like an idiot. Well, not an idiot. You just don't know what you're talking about, right? But that's the kind of thing that it is. What you control between your ISP and your house is such a small piece of the actual pie that, oh, cool, man. Thanks, dude. Wes? Well, they do want something to bitch about. You guys ever get home, you can't use Netflix? Netflix, fuck it, it's not working. I can't watch my shows, right? What's the first thing you do? You call Comcast. Guess what? Based on that model we drew, it could be Netflix's fault. But you're like, hey, I can't get to my fucking Comcast. I pay you stupid motherfuckers for 1,000 gigs down. Right? We do that all the time. But the reality of it is that it's such a small piece of the overall transit of the internet that it doesn't make sense to bitch about it. Like all these people, like I'm sorry, but I love Maddie. Maddie was on Twitter the other day. He's like, you don't deserve our money anymore. That just tells me that he hasn't taken the time to try and understand what the hell is driving all this, right? It's the living room analogy. How could anybody predict that this many people would need to eat? You can't. You cannot predict or have a bunch of capacity for an incident where this many people are gonna have to eat at the same time. It's like building a warehouse because you might have a party that's large enough to warrant it. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm not ragging on him. I just think there's other ways, there's ways to go about that shit, and no amount of money would fix this. The SMITE is a bad experience for a majority of players right now. If they could just wave a magic wand and say, hey, everything is better because we paid an extra $500,000, they probably would. If it was that easy, I would, right? The entire player base is suffering right now. People are bullshit pissed on Twitter and Reddit and everything else because they don't understand it. But it's not that simple. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. You guys want to switch to SMITE now? I can go downstairs. No. Actually, this is the best example that I have. And it's very topical, okay? Why don't we have enough hospital beds in the United States to treat the number of patients that we have? Because nobody thought in 100 years we would ever have this number of people that we had to serve. It is the exact same principle with the SMITE servers. And if we had enough hospital capacity, that means for 99 years out of 100, we would have empty hospital wings full of shit that we don't need. Right? It is the exact same fucking thing. So what are they doing? They're trying to take what they have and convert it into as many treatment facilities that they can so they can treat as many people as possible with the resources that they have while they work on building more.
Welcome back, you beautiful bastard.
Right? It's exactly what's going on with SMITE. They have to deal with the resources that they have. They have to make those resources as efficient as possible, and then they have to decide how much capacity they can increase by in as short a period of time as possible. Exactly, Sean. Exactly. Exactly. So anyway, was this helpful? You guys ready to play some games? Because I'll shut this shit off and I'll go back downstairs. Okay, so do me a favor. Now that I've explained this all to you, and I've gone on this massive rant, please give the guys at Hi-Rez a little bit more of a benefit of a doubt before you throw them under the bus and start raging on Twitter about shit not working, because everybody's having problems right now. These guys are stressed out, working from home, working late nights, trying to fix this shit for you, and everybody's dealing with the same problem. So anyway, I will see you guys in a bit. I'm gonna go run downstairs. There will be no disruption to the stream at all. It'll be a black screen for a couple of seconds, and then I'll pop on and we'll play some games. Sound good?